Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being on the webinar tonight. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Sports Medicine Fellowship Council webinar, Preparing for the Sports Medicine Match. This is our emergency medicine, internal medicine, and pediatric fellow panel, and I hope it's a good opportunity for our resident and student members to learn from current fellows that have successfully matched and share their advice and insights along the way. My name is McKenna Campbell-Potter, and I will be serving as the moderator this evening. I just finished my term serving as the fellow member liaison to the Practice and Policy Committee, as well as one of the officers on the AMSSM Sports Medicine Fellowship Council. I'm originally from Minnesota. I did my Med Peds residency at Yale and then completed my sports fellowship at Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. And I'm excited to be staying on as faculty at HSS. So tonight, we're honored to have 6 current fellows that are either EM, IM, or PEDS trained, who've offered to share their advice and insights about preparing for the sports medicine match. This is a really diverse group in terms of background and experience, and I hope it highlights how there are a lot of ways to get to sports medicine fellowship and to be successful. So to start, I'll have each fellow introduce themselves. You can say where you're from, where you completed your residency and in what specialty, and then where you're currently doing your sports fellowship. And after this, we'll then jump into the panel discussion. So to start things off with introductions, Samantha, I'll have you go first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sam. I'm from Long Island originally, grew up in New York. I did my residency at SUNY Downstate Kings County, where I actually did a combined program in both emergency and internal medicine. So got a good taste of both. And I'm currently a sports medicine fellow at Mount Sinai in New York City.
Awesome, thanks. Jonathan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jonathan Coss. I grew up in Indiana, did my med school there, and then went out to Arizona, and I also did a combined training program. I did a combined emergency and pediatrics residency, and then I am now in New York City with HSS doing my primary care sports fellowship. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jonathan. Let's do Alex next.
Everyone, I'm Alex. I'm originally from Wildwood, New Jersey. Did medical school in Boston and then stuck around for residency, where I actually was with Courtney, one of the other panelists. We both did pediatrics at the Boston Combined Residency Program, which is between Boston Children's and Boston Medical Center. And then I stuck around again for fellowship at Boston University.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Let's do Courtney next.
Hey everyone, I'm Courtney. Alex made my introduction really easy. I'm from Virginia and then did residency in Boston, and now I'm at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia as a fellow. Yeah.
Great. Kaylre.
Everyone, my name is Kaylre. I am from Ocean Township, New Jersey. I did med school at Rutgers at Robert Wood Johnson in Jersey. Then I did my pediatric fellowship at Children's Hospital at Montefiore in the Bronx, and now I'm at Hospital for Special Surgery with Jonathan. He failed to mention I'm his co-fellow, but yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Awesome, thanks, Kaylre. And last but not least, Jasmine.
Hey everyone, I'm Jasmine. I'm from Palmdale, California. I did my training in emergency medicine at LSU New Orleans. I'm currently the EM Sports Medicine Fellow at University of Florida.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for being here tonight, and thanks to everyone tuning in both now and virtually later. So the agenda for the evening is to start by asking the fellows a few preset questions. After this, we will then open it up to a Q&A where you can put your questions into the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So the first question for the panel is, what did you look for when choosing programs to apply to? And how did your specialty influence which programs you applied to?
I can go. So first question is, what influenced where I applied to? So I really loved my experience of just following a college team in New Orleans. So I had my mentor basically was involved in D1 and also NFL. And I remember him telling me, if you want to consider, and it's not saying that other paths can't do it, but his path was, if you want to consider like professional and elite level, consider looking at D1 teams to train with essentially. So that was the advice I got. Now, not to say that I didn't apply to some other programs that had other, other things of interest that I wasn't part of, but mainly it was Division I schools I applied for. As far as emergency medicine, it was really important for me to work as an attending on the emergency medicine side and to be able to practice emergency medicine at least once every 2 weeks to keep those skills up. So being from a 4-year program, that definitely played a factor. So that with a balance of, everything I talked about earlier, and that's how I ended up at University of Florida.
I can piggyback off that. I think Dr. Holmes said it quite perfectly. You get to this spot, and every fellowship that is somewhere that you would apply is going to be able to train you to a great extent in sports medicine. But some fellowships might have better portions of their training that relate to your long-term career goals. So if you're really interested in doing something in a Division I field or a professional field, I would definitely look into programs that might have those types of connections, just because you could get some of that experience and see if it's something you want to do, and then utilize that and the networking that you gain from that moving forward. Additionally, I think a lot of people that interviewed on my cycle had different constraints, whether it was geographic constraints or family constraints or different things. So that was important for me. I pretty much applied all over the country and just looked at the programs that had the type of training that I wanted. And that really made it easy when I interviewed, because then I was able to answer those very poignant interview questions of why my program, why are you sitting across the table from me tonight? And I think we'll get into more of those questions later. But that was kind of my approach, was picking programs where my background, emergency and peds could be utilized, and then had the type of sports training for my long-term career goals, which for me were staying in academics, doing team coverage, and then mixing in emergency shifts, and then that clinic, hopefully, when I'm all said and done.
I could echo a little bit. As I went through the process, I started to learn what was important to me, and I personally narrowed it down to three big things, which was like ultrasound exposure, procedural exposure, and team coverage. And so just kind of sussing out which programs had what to what extent, and similar to what Dr. Holmes and Dr. Coss mentioned, how it fit my goals, my long-term goals. Because not to jump ahead to number 3, but that was a big question that was asked on interviews, is what are your long-term goals? Like, where do you want to be, to try to see if that program was a good fit for you. Or, that was like kind of how I narrowed down my 3. And then other things were extra and nice, like teaching opportunities, my EM schedule, things like that. But I made those 3 topics my top 3 as I was looking.
I similarly had a few points that I was specifically looking for in programs. I want to be a collegiate focused, full spectrum sports medicine physician. And so for me, it was really important to be at a program that had extensive amount of college coverage, ideally some amount of Power 4 to be able to see all the levels of collegiate athletics. I also wanted my longitudinal clinic to be student health services or university health services based, to be able to get the experience in the role that I want to fill one day. I was also, similarly to Dr. Mazzeo, looking for a strong ultrasound emphasis, both procedurally and diagnostically, and the ability to pursue other interests within ultrasound, so things like emergency ultrasound. And then lastly, my background is in policy, and so I wanted a place that at least had some ability to support or some opportunity that was adjacent or policy relevant.
My decision making was similar. I had some geographic constraints, and I wanted to make sure that the program that I ended up with had good infrastructure to support my career goals. And I'm interested in endocrinology and sports medicine, so I was looking at the endocrine departments at the different programs as well. And then coming from a peds background, I wanted to make sure that I got a lot of procedural experience, and so that was an important factor when I was going through the interview cycle and asking questions about what the program offered.
I actually, when I was applying, didn't really know what I wanted, like what level of coverage, whether it was just high school, whether it was college or professional. So I actually was really emphasizing, or I wanted to interview at places that had all three types of coverage, which kind of limits you, but that's something that I wanted to be exposed to. And so I know I like clinic and I know I like procedures, and I obviously wanted a program that had strong ultrasound and heavy procedure or just opportunities, but I really wanted to go to a program that had like all three levels of coverage just so I can see what I wanted to do.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I think some of the areas where there's a lot of variability between programs is what you guys already touched on with the level of coverage. Procedural training is something to really think about as well. And so I think those are two things that are really useful when looking at programs. Moving on to the next question. If we're thinking about, so we thought about where we wanted to apply to, now we got to the interview stage. During your fellowship interviews, what questions or topics came up over and over again? And if you had any gaps or weaknesses, did those come up during the interviews? And if so, how did you kind of address those?
I'll say it again. I think the number one question I got asked everywhere is, what are you looking to get out of a sports medicine fellowship for your career? And kind of having that dialed in a little bit is important. And then really looking at the program you're interviewing with and seeing on their website or through the info that they've sent you what they offer, and tying that together is incredibly useful, I think, from an interviewee standpoint.
Yeah, there were certainly core questions that I tried to prepare for. Obviously, like knowing some sort of spiel about yourself, and then what you're looking for in a program, where you see yourself in 5 years and 10 years. And then honestly, a good hack for interview season is just asking ChatGPT to give you some questions, and you can say, make it harder, and it'll make it harder. And my roommate did that, and I thought it was kind of silly, but it worked out really well, actually.
I remember a couple really distinct questions. One of the big ones is like, why are you interested in us? So like definitely have an answer for that going into it. What are your goals? Like others have already said, like where you see yourself, so that they can kind of decide if they're a good fit for you. And then some other ones were coverage opportunities. A lot of places like to ask like, what was your favorite coverage opportunity? Like tell me about the different things you've covered and what you learned from them. And then another one was just like about my residency experience. Like a lot of people were like, oh, like tell me about your time like working in the ER, like tell me about a case, where you learned XYZ, or different things like that. So I think they kind of want to get to know you, like kind of like who you are outside of just from the sports perspective. So having some of answers to those questions was helpful.
Yeah, I think, echoing off that, there were a number of questions that kept repeating themselves. What type of sports medicine doctor do you want to be? Where do you see your career in 5, 10 years? But I also got a few others that I'm sure others were asked. Tell me about an interesting sideline case. Tell me about your sideline coverage experiences. I got asked a few questions that were a little bit more specific to me, and I think just based on how I wrote my essays, tell me about your policy background and how it fits with sports medicine. I got asked about what were my ultrasound experiences and why was I interested in that. And then I think the answer to question one that we were asked previously is, what kind of doctor do you want to be, and sort of what were you looking for in a program? That's the question you're going to ask the most.
Definitely want to echo on those things, and maybe just like a different angle of maybe not the question, but I can tell you about things that came up in conversation a lot. For me specifically was the diversity of my sports coverage. So if you have one of those cool, unique sports coverage, it may stick out. If you were like a former athlete, that may stick out. If you've like kind of started some type of sports medicine track new to your residency, that may stick out too. So just being innovative, passionate, diversifying, and then if you have some athletic, passionate about sports, of course.
One other thing that I distinctly remember looking back is kind of like both Dr. Holmes and Dr. Pomerantz were just saying, is they will ask specific questions based on your resume. And so know your resume in and out. I had one place I interviewed where the orthopedics department also had an interviewer. So one of the ortho surgeons was on the circuit and asked me a distinct question about like a case presentation that I had written up before. And it was years ago, and I'm glad I remembered it, but it was like the arcuate sign. And like in the middle of the interview, it was just straight up like, what's the arcuate sign? And I had to pull it out of nowhere. So if you put it in your resume, make sure you know it. It's just an age-old saying, and it definitely came up on my trail.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. And feel free to keep posting questions in the chat too. There was one logistical question about if we're not able to stay on for the whole session, will the recording be posted later? And yes, it will be posted on the AMSSM website, or not the website, the YouTube channel. So you can find it there. Perfect. Thanks, Joan. All right, moving on to our third and final preset question before we open it up to a Q&A discussion is thinking about your rank list. What did you value when you were building your rank list? And now that you're here and an active fellow, is there anything that you would have changed about kind of things that you looked for and valued in programs when building that rank list?
When I was building my rank list, I'm from Jersey, as I said before. And so I did want to stay somewhere that was close to home. That's something I think it would not be wise to tell you to not think about like where you see yourself living, but even though it's for a year, it's important to you. And then program wise, kind of along the lines of like what we were looking for when like we were applying for the programs, I wanted to make sure I had 3 or like multiple opportunities for coverage. I wanted a lot of concussion exposure personally, because I see myself doing a lot of concussion work in the future. And coming from peds, it's not as much procedures. And so I wanted to make sure I got my hands with procedures. And so procedures, location, and then just opportunities for coverage were big for me.
Over the course of the interview season, I think I got a pretty strong sense of there were maybe a handful of programs that stuck out in terms of the things that I was looking for before the interview season started. So heavy collegiate coverage, the freedom to get involved in lots of different sports on campus, and have university health services or student health services dedicated time, good ultrasound curriculum, and good ultrasound regular exposure every day in clinic. And then once I got it narrowed down to a handful of locations, then it was about where makes the most sense for my family geographically, and where did I feel like the program was the best fit interpersonally. And I think for me, the intangible that sort of tipped over was that I was able to stay in a program where I knew all the faculty, and so I was able to hit the ground running. But that certainly isn't necessarily the case for everybody.
On another, just kind of another angle of it, if you are a person that doesn't mind, sacrificing geography for a year, definitely consider, a program that, that can be a right fit. There's a couple programs I passed up that was probably, to me, in a better location. I'm coming from New Orleans, y'all, than, Gainesville, but as far as me being here, I've had great. I would not change my rank list whatsoever. Like I've had great experience from the procedures, from football coverage, literally coming from the football coverage by myself with the attending on call. So like definitely very grateful. And sometimes like, it's worth the sacrifice if you're coming from a big city to go to a smaller town to get that experience and just to get that invest in. Like a lot of the attendings are just investing in your success. And sometimes that's worth for a year. If you don't have, other obligations and means, so if you don't have any ties, or I will say highly consider thinking outside the box, going somewhere maybe a little uncomfortable, the unknown, and it may pay off.
Yeah, the feeling of mentorship and investment was huge in the decision-making process. And it meant so much to have people interested in what I was interested in. And this year for Continuity Clinic, I'm in endocrine, so I'm still getting that exposure while I get my sports medicine. And being able to craft my fellowship year was a really cool opportunity.
Along the same lines, I also started to pay attention just to how the people I was interviewing with like interacted amongst each other, like on the interview, even though it was on Zoom, which was very difficult. I think Jonathan's probably the only one with me that remembers interviewing all in person before COVID, having done a 5-year residency. But seeing that like camaraderie within a program like ended up having like an influence for me. Obviously those three things I mentioned earlier. So um I personally want like Olympic experience, so choosing a program that had working with Olympic teams and not only working with them but like having some autonomy with it, that was big for me. So all the other things we talked about, but also just like vibes and like kind of how you feel if your personality matches like with those people. Because I think as others have mentioned, like a lot of programs are phenomenal. You'll get a lot of the similar things, and then it'll kind of come down to these like little itty bitty details that'll make certain programs feel more highlighted for you specifically. So
Totally agree. And for the third time, it was literally just ranking the best program for the fit of what I wanted. But then throughout the interview season, I think sitting across from all these interviewers, you kind of get a feel of, are these people that I could see myself working with? Are these people that I could see myself wanting to become and kind of emulate? And so, you know, if you're interviewing with people that do Olympics and you want to do Olympics and you really relate to them, of course, you're going to really think about ranking that program higher. Or you start interviewing with people that are really invested in Division 1 and you really think that Division 1's where you want to be, you're going to start to think about ranking those places higher. So that's kind of how I ended up doing my rank list. Is at the end of the day, I had the best training in mind and then looked back at my interview cycle and thought about all the people I interviewed with and was like, okay, if I'm going to get 1 year, who do I want to spend my time with and who's going to be able to kind of help me meet my goals, and then what can I bring them as well. And then I don't know, do you guys know, I know we're doing in-person interviews. I think about a third of my interviews last year for sports were actually in person. So it was a weird mix of having in person and then virtual and then trying to compare that on a rank list. I think there are pros and cons to both, and that's a whole different Zoom lecture. But Dr. Campbell-Potter, do you know if there's like a online, are they posting who's doing in person or Zoom, or is it all just you get your interview and figure it out?
You know, I don't know if there is a dedicated resource where you can look up to see which program does in-person versus virtual. If it doesn't exist, which I don't think it does, we should maybe make that, because I think that's probably helpful for people. But no, unfortunately, at least in my experience as well, it was just program to program. They would tell you, are you interviewing virtually or in person? While we're on this topic, because this is something I was hoping to get to as well, how many or what percentage of your interviews were in person for this last interview cycle? Because I know it's been changing from year to year.
About 50% of my interviews were in person, and then most were virtual.
I think about a quarter to a third were in person. Some give you the option, and I don't know how true this is. People say if you have the option, you should go in person. So if I take that into account, probably like a third, maybe approaching half in person.
Perfect. Well, let's jump into the Q&A portion of this webinar. So thanks for already putting some questions in the chat. Feel free to keep adding to them. Our first question comes from one of our medical students who is wondering about doing not family medicine residency. And she specifically posed the question to peds residents, but I think it really applies to anyone on this panel because we're all not family medicine. Did you feel any stigma or barriers to applying and matching to fellowship, not doing a family medicine residency?
I think the big thing coming from a peds perspective is that I had to think about was that like, okay, I'm not managing like their essential medicine, right? And so like I didn't feel any hindrance in applying because I knew all of the musculoskeletal stuff I could probably handle. And then coming from from medical school into residency, why I didn't apply family medicine, I hated my family medicine rotation. Truthfully, it wasn't for me, it was my first rotation, and I had a really bad experience. And I don't think I got a good taste of what family medicine truly is. And I really enjoy working with kids, and I still want to work with kids, but I also realize that I think I can handle musculoskeletal pathologies in in people of any age. And so that was kind of how I got over that. There was some stigma. I got a lot of questions like, oh, why don't you just do this? Because I didn't want to, but that's just me. But
Yeah, I remember this question haunting me when I was a third year and a fourth year deciding which specialty to apply into. So very relatable. I think ultimately what drew me to pediatrics was the same values that drew me to medicine in the first place. And a lot of that revolved around preventive care and, encouraging people at a time in their life where I felt like it mattered most. Um, so it felt really great about that once I kind of decided like, okay, like this residency is most consistent with my values, whether or not I do sports medicine. And a lot of athletes, I want to say like this might be wrong. So Dr. Campbell-Potter, correct me if I am like saying something crazy, but I think like 80% of the athletes who competed in Tokyo were below the age of 30 in the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah.
So I felt pretty confident that, pediatrics training would give a solid background in medicine um, and especially with like performing artist athletes or, some of the younger athletes, I thought that would give a pretty solid background.
I'll add one thing, kind of piggybacking off that. Be careful not to choose a residency only with the goal of doing sports medicine at the end, because you can do sports medicine from EM, IM, PEDS, PM&R, and family medicine, and you will have opportunities to match into a program no matter which of those residencies you do. And so make sure you're doing a residency that you're enjoying and that you're going to thrive in, because one of the things programs like to look at and that they've shared out loud, throughout my interview trail, was that they just want to see you doing good in your residency. Like, just be a really good PM&R resident, be a really good IM resident, and then, take your interests to sports, as you get there. So just be cautious as you're making that decision as you choose a residency.
Yeah, and it's for me, I was focused on just getting into residency at that point. But I loved emergency medicine, and I honestly came to sports medicine later. So, like it's a 4-year program. My second year, beginning my second year, I started really looking into sports medicine. So it's not too late to just focus on your primary specialty, and then when, if things fall in line, if that's what you decide that you want to do. And then you also have to be just talking to some attending. Sometimes your first job is not your dream sports job after getting out of fellowship. So you may be practicing in your primary specialty. So you like just piggyback, you have to be okay with your primary specialty as well.
Great. Yeah, I think those are all really important points. There was a question about away rotations. I'll pose the question. Did you do any away rotations? And if so, what were the expectations while you were on the away, as far as like what your sports knowledge was, what your kind of day-to-day responsibilities were during the away elective?
I did one away rotation closer to home, and then I did two home rotate, or I guess yeah, at least two home rotations, because we technically had two fellowships we were affiliated with through our residency. And so I think the expectations were pretty comparable across all three rotations. I think all three gave me a good sense of what it would have been like to be a fellow there, and I think the expectations were very comparable. Of course, it's harder when you're doing an away rotation. You're not as familiar with the system, you're not as familiar with the faculty, so you just have to hit the ground running and just be thoughtful about that. One of the ways that I streamlined my introduction for the away rotation is I actually took all my key dot phrases from Epic, from my home program, and threw them into my notes on my phone, and then I could copy and paste that quickly, and I could use that to reference or present off of. So I found that as a helpful trick just to sort of ease the integration a little bit.
I also did an away rotation. It technically was considered an observership, and so legally I wasn't allowed to do much. And it was kind of like any third year rotation, or maybe like early third year rotation, where you're just shadowing a lot. The expectation was that I have like a general baseline orthopedic knowledge, because it was just all clinic, and then I did some physical therapy stuff. And then it was like, it's a huge opportunity to network, and so obviously you have to be on your P's and Q's and just make sure that you're super nice, that you're making good impression because you're probably going to apply that program anyway. I did my away rotation in June, which was like a month or so before I actually applied. And so that's also something to keep in mind. At my institution, it took me a year to get approved. And so I applied a year out. So also keep that timeline in mind.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience to Dr. Graves. The away that I did was an observership. It was through somebody I met at a booth at AMSSM at one of the conferences. And they asked me if I wanted to come out. And by the time that we had coordinated things, my institution from residency could not get a working agreement with the institution that I was going to. So it ended up just being kind of like a shadowing experience, but I got to be in clinic. I did some sports coverage, and it was a great networking experience and learning. I got to learn a lot without the um, role of having to write all the notes and put in the orders, which was kind of nice. But I would be on it from an early time point if it's something you're really interested in doing a full formal away.
I'll just say one quick point. I think being teachable and just being someone easy to talk to is probably two of the biggest ways you can make a good impression. Because if you go trying to show off your knowledge and say, look at all the things I know this, I know that, that could actually come off a little bit not abrasive, but just not warm and um on on a good terms necessarily. So I think just going in with a positive attitude, acknowledging your knowledge gaps, and just being eager to learn, eager to be a team player, I think that gets received really well because they don't expect you to know everything in sports. They just expect you to be excited to learn.
There's a lot of small talk on the sidelines, and you want to you want to be chill, you want to be cool, you want to be friendly. No one wants to be around you if you're not relaxed, essentially. So
Yeah, I think those are all really important points. And I think highlighting the observership versus active away rotation is an important thing to know going in, because a lot of quote unquote away rotations are really just observerships where you're shadowing, which is fine. And those can be great experiences as well. But I think it's helpful to have that expectation going in.
One thing I just thought about, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. One thing I just thought about for away rotations is it's worthwhile to think about the timing when you want the away rotation to be. So if you're really interested in doing, seeing what college coverage is like, you probably want to be there during when college is in session, right? So not during winter break, not during summer break. So just being thoughtful with your residency program as you're planning your elective time, how you're going to structure that, and then communicating that early to the fellowship program that you're interested in doing the away with.
Can I can I also? So with me, I wasn't able to do in a way. It was a lot of kind of like protocols, and working with my institution wasn't able to do away, but I was still able to work with my local mentor from another institution in the same city. So don't get discouraged if it doesn't work out. Still have that clinical experience, so you're able to talk about that, so you're able to see if you even like that side of sports medicine, because that will come up. But as long as you're getting some type of clinical experience, you still can be, a strong candidate and do well in interviews. Just really wanting understanding like that sports medicine is not just sports coverage, right? There's other aspects of it, and they, fellowships want to make sure you understand that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Moving on to rec letters, there were a couple questions about letters of recommendation. And so how many letters did you need? Who did they come from? And if you did in a way, did you get or felt like you needed to get a letter from your away rotation?
So I had no letters of recommendation for my observership. It was a 2-week observership. I thought I built enough rapport for them to for me to make a good impression, but definitely not a long enough one where I thought they could have write a strong letter. I did match at the institution I did my away rotation at, so in hindsight, maybe I could have asked for one. And so I genuinely don't know if anyone else has done the same, but I didn't. And then I had like pediatric, obviously. Like I had one like sports letter from my home institution that I did in a rotation at, and then the rest of them were from peds.
I got rec letters initially from my residency program director, my research mentor, which was mostly based policy research, and then from a sports med attending at one of my home programs. I ended up doing a rotation at the other affiliated fellowship and asked for a letter of rec late in the application, like a little bit later into the application cycle, and that worked out really well. My away rotation was in the like solidly into the fall because I wanted to be there during the college season. So it was too late to ask for a letter of rec. It was already when interviews were starting.
I had typically most of the programs that I applied to required a program director one from your primary specialty, and a sports medicine one. Now you want to be careful because there are some programs that want maybe I forgot if they wanted I think one of them wanted an extra sports medicine one, so that had me get two sports medicine recs, my primary rec and my program director. So just check on the websites if you're interested in that program to make sure like you're getting the appropriate letters for that program.
Yeah, I think most programs needed program director to write a letter, and most needed at least one sports letter. And then I just had two other letters from like one of my mentors and one of the other program directors that I was close with from the EM side.
Learn from my mistakes. This was a classic. I had a mentor for multiple years, almost for 4 years, that knew me very well, wrote me a letter, and I asked her to submit it on the date that it was due or whatever, and then forgot that there was a processing time. So there's like a 2 to 3 day processing window of where once they submit it, has to get reviewed. And so thankfully she submitted it right at that window. So it all ended up being fine. And I was able to send my application out, I think the day or the day after it opened. But I did lose some years off my life waiting for that letter to get submitted. So maybe pick like 3 or 4 days before the application can go out and say that this is the hard deadline for your letters to get submitted if that's possible. I don't know if anybody else had that same experience.
Yeah, when I got my letter, my delayed letter that was about a month later, I actually just individually emailed every program I applied to and said, could you please re-download my ERAS application? I have a new letter of rec that's been uploaded.
Yeah, I did say that the due date was about a week before it was actually due. So that's a good tip. I did about the same. I had my program director, my continuity clinic preceptor, one of the PIs that I did research with, and then a sports medicine mentor.
Also with timeline, give your the people you're asking at least a month like heads up. That way they're not like, you're not surprising them like, hey, I need this letter in 3 days. I would say, I mean, I'm kind of pulling this timeline out of nowhere, so if anybody else has other recommendations, but I'd say giving them at least a month heads up from when that due date is would be ideal.
It can also be helpful to offer some of the things that you would like in your letter. Like that's definitely not discouraged, especially if you've had certain sideline coverage or experience that you want highlighted, or volunteer experiences, research experiences, just so that you have your highlights in each letter, even if it's coming from different people.
Perfect. And while we're on the topic of letters, there was a question about if you can get letters from PM&R faculty or sports surgeons. Is that something that anyone did? Yeah. Yeah, I can say for myself, I did not have a letter from a surgeon or a PM&R person, but I think that probably would be open and welcome to most programs. Especially if you're coming from a place that doesn't have like a lot of primary sports people around. If you're showing that you have initiative and you hung out with one of the surgeons or the physiatrists in place of a primary sports doc, I think that would be very welcome and probably could offer a lot of good perspective on your skills as well. So I think probably yes, that's fine. moving on to number of programs you applied to. I know this can always be a really stressful topic for people. So how many programs did you apply to, and how many programs did you end up ranking at the end of the day?
I applied to 2, which I would not recommend to anyone. Like Dr. Coss, this took years off my life, so I would definitely apply to more in retrospect.
I was the other end of the spectrum from Courtney. We were talking about it during the application season. I think I applied to, I want to say close to 20, and then I ended up interviewing and ranking, like accepting the interviews and ranking maybe 12 or 13, I want to say.
Yeah, I was also on that spectrum. I didn't come from a program where a lot of people did sports. Only like maybe 3 of our alumni in the last 25 years pursued sports. So I didn't really have like an EM sports mentor. So I panicked and I over applied, which I think I applied to at least 30 programs, which in hindsight was too many. But I'd rather have that problem than be nervous and not match at all. And then I ranked, I think I ended up ranking like over 15 programs. There is a cost depending on how many you rank. Once you hit certain numbers, I don't quote me on it, but like once you hit certain numbers, you have to like pay more to rank more. So I didn't want to pay more, so I ranked as much as I could without having to pay extra.
Piggyback, I applied to about in the 30s. Same thing. Last time a sports medicine fellow came on a program was like 2010 with a different program director. So everything was very new. I interviewed with 11 and I ranked 11.
I also, I think, applied to like 25, 30, and I interviewed only 10.
I think everyone says you don't have to apply and interview as many places as you actually do, but when you're in the hot seat, you end up doing more. And so I was of that same spot where I think I applied in the high 20s or 30s, all the programs I was interested in. I interviewed, I think, at like 16 or 17, and then ranked all those.
Yeah, I think this is somewhere where there's huge variability, and sometimes there's very real geographic constraints or other reasons to only apply to a few programs. But I would say, yeah, there's a very wide range here as far as how many programs we apply to. But I think a lot of people, myself included, tended to over apply, but it is what it is. There was a question about kind of teasing out a program that's just talking the talk and one that's walking the walk, as far as like, how did you, during your interviews and when you were thinking about your rank list, really feel like a program was being genuine with you and invested in your own personal growth and success versus just being someone to be on the sideline and cover games?
I would, so what I did is, you talk when when you're interviewing, the fellows are nice and, they're brand new, they're excited to be there, right? And then I would encourage everyone to contact the fellow offline during mid-fellowship and see how they feel. Do they feel the same? There was fellows that I was surprised, that did change into my rank list of how I rank things. And there was other fellows that I'm like, wow, like they are talking the talk, like, to the point this fellow stayed on, essentially here. So everything's great when you're around a big group of people. I don't think everyone is as transparent as if you catch someone offline. So I would encourage you guys to, I will even wait until later on, halfway through to contact the fellows, be like, hey, I'm about to, rank list. I would love to talk to you. A lot of fellows are receptive, and then have that talk, obviously respectfully, but I think you will get a little more detail about, more transparency of how their experience been.
I really didn't get the impression that fellowship was comparable to residency. I think all of us, those of us who've done residency or in residency, do at times feel like residency is they need your labor. for better or worse. I've never felt that way about fellowship. I didn't feel that way on the fellowship interview trail. I never got that impression from other fellows. Maybe others did, but it feels like it's a stage in your training where people are really invested in your learning, and your labor isn't, while it's helpful, it isn't necessary to keep the fellowship or to keep the department functioning in the same way that a residency program is.
Great. Thinking about, this has come up a couple times now, but if you came from a residency program that didn't have a lot of sports opportunities or a full sports fellowship program, how did you seek out opportunities to get coverage or find research opportunities if there weren't a lot of things kind of just right immediately available to you?
So coming from a program that was kind of like that, I think my first step of trying to figure out just the sports medicine, fellowship or just specialty was if you're emergency medicine, EMRA has a good mentorship. So I was plugged into one of the sports medicine docs and was able to get a little more insight of even just a direction where to go. From then, you just have to cold email people. You knock on the door. Sometimes those doors won't open, but it only takes one. So luckily, my mentor, I literally Googled. We have Tulane at New Orleans, Tulane, Loyola. So I'm like Tulane medicine team physician. Found his information, just randomly emailed him, and he was one of the ones that responded. Luckily, we went to, I told him a little bit about myself. We went to the same undergrad, so I'm certain if that helped. But he opened a bunch of opportunities. So you're gonna get some no's, but you're also all you need is one yes to really, to make that CV and get that experience. So don't get discouraged if you're not. It took me a good probably 6 months to finally get the ball rolling.
This could also be really like almost like a blessing in disguise, because when you can seek out these opportunities and create these opportunities for yourself, it stands out to programs and it shows how much you're interested and how excited you are about the field. Um, because it's easy. Like I came from a program that had a sports fellowship, so there was coverage and electives that I was able to jump on, um but when you could be like, hey, I didn't have all this readily available and I was able to like find these opportunities and get these experiences, that really stands out to programs. And it might be a little more difficult. It's definitely more difficult up front, but the opportunities are there. Like, I don't know where you're from, and depending on where you're from, like we could talk separately, but usually you can seek what's happening in, the programs around you, or like even if it's not related to like a residency, like where there's events, like if there's a running race or a bike race or anything where volunteers are needed, like I hate to say it like this, but like people will take free work. So if you're interested in getting that exposure and you're saying, hey, I'm a doctor looking to get experience, how can I volunteer? Like people will connect with you and get you those opportunities.
Yeah, and I would add too that I think generally we're a pretty friendly group. And so I think the cold email or reaching out to someone that you don't know very well and just saying, hey, is there any opportunity available for me to be on the sidelines at the football game with you or whatever? I think that goes a long way. And I think people within our specialty are generally pretty receptive to that if you are showing interest. I think we have time for a couple more questions. One thing I did want to pose to the group, where we've talked a lot about sports coverage and things like that, but what did you really find that was most impactful in your residency that helped prepare you well for fellowship?
Honestly, it was showing up every day and just trying to get the reps, like really just being eager, whether it was in the emergency department and, just seeing things pop up on the board that were a little bit scary and intimidating, or being in primary care clinic and, taking that last patient of the day. Not saying that that's always the right thing to do, but really just trying to get as many reps as you can, because pattern recognition is important. And medicine pops up everywhere, whether you're on the sidelines, whether you're in clinic. So really just trying to get, the best foundation that you can, and recognizing that your time as a trainee is fleeting and extremely important.
Think learning how to adapt. I learned that a lot in residency and in emergency medicine as well, and just even like us being a safety net hospital. And then also while you're doing that, right, you're still doing coverage or trying to do things to get prepare you for sports medicine or kind of learn more. So just hustle, adaptation, being flexible with your schedule. Those are the things I've learned in my residency.
I think residency is definitely about the reps and learning your own process of being able to come to a conclusion on every case that comes in front of you on how you handle it. For us in sports, we all come from these different backgrounds, whether it's PM&R, FM, IM, PEDS, and we all bring pieces of our own individual experience from residency to the table. When you get to sports, everybody has that process hopefully down and can help utilize their own background to get to the answer that's needed for whatever's in front of them. There's so many different pieces. Like from the ped side, I was really comfortable with clinic things that I wasn't as comfortable with if I just had done emergency. But on emergency, I was good with, some of the more critical sideline management things that have come up. When I work with the PM&R people, they know way more spine and MSK stuff than I do. The family docs have a better grasp on some of the outpatient, like longitudinal adult medicine things that I didn't manage as an ER doc. So I think knowing that you have your strengths and your weaknesses are really important. And then just understanding that residency prepares you for the process of being able to get to the right answer is what I took from my experience.
Yeah, I think that's also true. It's just really trying to be a good resident and show interest and learn as much as you can. And the medicine is what comes up a lot during fellowship, and that's what you need to be solid on when you start. And so I think just trying to learn as much medicine as possible as a resident, and then you use your year as a sports fellow to learn the whole musculoskeletal component as well. All right, I think we are getting close to wrapping up. And so I just wanted to ask one last question to each of our panelists about if they have any final thoughts for our residents and students as they're thinking about where they might apply to, where they're going to interview this fall, or how you build your rank list, anything that we haven't touched on yet that you were hoping to share with the group this evening.
I will say that if you got it interviewed, you're qualified to be there as far as just that specific programs. It's really about just fit. So see if they're the right fit for you. And then, if they're, and then vice versa, they were probably looking for if you're the right fit for them. Okay. So just remember you got the interview, be yourself, see if they're a fit, and they're also seeing if you're a fit as well.
Residency was really hard, and there were good things about it for sure, but it was a very challenging time. Being on the other side has been wonderful. I've loved my experience with fellowship so far. So exactly like what Dr. Holmes said, you're going to get your interviews, be who you are, you're supposed to be there, and then wherever you end up is where you're supposed to be. And it's been quite wonderful so far.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel, y'all. There is a light.
Yeah, and the sports medicine community is awesome. Everyone is laid back and, just a humble, fun-loving group. So you have a lot to look forward to.
Fellowship's been the most fun part of my training, far, far and away. It's something to look forward to. You're going to have a blast. And I feel pretty confidently, no matter what program I would have selected that I applied to, I would have had an unbelievable experience. And I'm sure that's going to hold for you all as well.
Awesome. Well, oh, Sam, were you going to go?
I mean, I'm just echoing what everybody said. Fellows, like graduating residency was, finishing that chapter of my life feels really good, and being done with that feels really good. And fellowship has just been so much fun from day one, and I can't recommend it enough.
Well said. Well said. Well, I think that's all we have time for. So thank you. Thank you to our fellow panel for being willing to share your insights about your journey to fellowship and experiences thus far. And thanks to our resident and student members for tuning in for tonight's webinar. And it's been a pleasure to be the moderator. And we look forward to seeing you at future AMSSM webinars and events going forward. Thanks, everyone.